Hello and welcome to this podcast with Metering and Smart Energy International. My name is Claire Volkwyn and I'm the editor of the publication. We recently had the opportunity to speak to Edward Benning, Smart Grid Integration and Security Lead for the EMEA region for the OMNETRIC Group about the concept of IT-OT integration. Here's what he had to say. Edward, thank you for joining us today. I was wondering if we could start with the first question, which is, of course, what is IT-OT integration and why is it so important?
Well, IT-OT integration is about bringing the IT domain and the operational domain together. I think there's a lot to be gained by marrying, aligning, and integrating the work that goes on in both. In fact, it is the foundation for operating the grid distribution business of tomorrow. Operating them that manage to align IT and OT and integrate the process, technology, and data will be much better placed to capture the benefits of the digitization of the grid and respond to the challenges they are facing now and in the future.
And what kind of challenges can IT-OT integration help address?
Let's take a step back for a moment. The evolution towards a smarter grid means that we used to be one-way flows of energy and limited data are evolving into multi-directional flows of energy and in huge quantities of digital data. Just think about the increase of distributed energy resources and batteries in PHEV, for example. To manage those multi-directional flows, we are implementing more and more devices and sensors, which all result in more and more data. On top of that, utilities are dealing with environmental mandates and lots of other pressures, for example, to reduce expenditure, to improve customer services, and to achieve greater reliability. That makes things very much more complex than they used to be. Utilities need to find a way to collect all the benefits out of this flood of data and to actually solve the challenges they are facing. This is where IT-OT integration comes in, I think. As an example, we are working with a number of UK operators to help them meet the requirements of the UK Smart Metering Implementation Programme. Here we are looking at using smart meter data in both customer service operations as well as in grid operations to improve the outage management process. This will reduce the outage impact as well as improve the customer satisfaction.
Why is it so difficult to achieve IT-OT integration?
Most TSOs and DSOs are actively engaging in IT-OT integration, but there's a wide variation in progress that they have made so far. Let's look at the IDC Insight research on this topic, for example. You see that across Europe, more than 90% of the utilities have started IT-OT integration, but only 46% of them have completed basic initiatives. And these are initiatives like smart meter deployment, analytics projects, field force application implementation, GIS network modeling. Also, some research done recently by Accenture show that even though 3/4 of the utility executives see IT-OT integration as highly important for delivering their future business requirements, 40% of them are still only in a strategy phase. Coming back to your question, there are several reasons why it's difficult. The main reasons I see are security, lack of interoperability, and cultural issues.
Security. Tell us a little bit about security challenges.
A lot of utilities have deep-seated fear of exposing OT systems to the IT world, and it's easy to understand why. It's a fact that opening up their grid operations to IT systems, utilities are potentially exposing themselves and the grid to cyber security attacks. Cyber breaches can degrade performance and lead to business losses. So it's a very real concern, and grid operators do need to evaluate the risk. In our work with utilities, we sometimes see situations where security fears hold them back, even where IT-OT integration seems like a no-brainer. To give you an example, utilities think twice before attempting to integrate their distribution management systems with the GIS systems, or before using smart meter data to improve outage management.
So how do you get around that?
Yes, first bake security into the core of the solution, rather than laying it on top of it at the end. It's all too easy to forget about security measures once the project is in flight. Secondly, we make it a priority to weigh up the risk with the potential value to be achieved. Obviously, when integration results into significant risk and the business value is not very tangible, integration does not make sense.
So given that IT-OT integration is so important, perhaps you could talk through some of the issues around the lack of interoperability and how this is holding operators back from implementing IT-OT.
Yes, IT-OT integration is primarily about making the data in network control, OT, and enterprise systems, IT, available to each other to optimize the performance and fine-tune control over the grid. Unfortunately for utilities, traditional SCADA systems were not conceived or built for integration. The more recently available grid management systems used by DSOs and TSOs do enable integration, but they are still often used in very isolated environments. Where integration does exist, it's old-fashioned point-to-point integration that has limited interoperability, is very costly, complex to manage, and not secure. At OMNETRIC Group, we are involved in industry-wide initiatives to promote interoperability and open standards like Common Information Model. The usage of technologies like Enterprise Service Bus can simplify the exchange of information for applications and systems. An example is the NREL Integrate project. We are working with a number of partners to develop an open field message bus architecture for microgrid management.
You mentioned that cultural influences can be a barrier to IT-OT adoption. What is the issue there?
Yeah, I think the cultural barrier is a very important issue. There's two main cultural influences that contribute to the resistance of operators to integrate IT-OT systems. Firstly, utilities operate in a regulated culture where price has been a guiding principle for decades. Over the past 10 years, regulators have gradually shifted their attentions away from price towards quality. This has obliged operators to invest more in managing outage, improving customer service, and facilitating the transition to a low carbon footprint. Despite this shift, many operators have a hard time to adjust. The second point, and perhaps the most significant, is the cultural change for operators wanting to integrate IT-OT is getting organizational silos to talk the same language and move in the same direction. On one side, you have IT that's traditionally associated with back office information systems used for conducting business type transactions. On the IT side, you've got the manual data entry. The resources tend to be centered in offices, server rooms, or corporate data centers. On the other side, you've got OT. OT is typically associated with field-based devices connected to the distribution system and infrastructure for monitoring and control those devices. This includes control center-based applications such as SCADA, as well as distribution management systems. In the OT world, most communications are performed device to device, device to computer, with relatively little human interaction. So, as you can see, information technology and operational technology have developed along separate paths. They operate in separate arenas. They have their own goals and agendas, different attitudes towards risk and innovation. They live their own lives. Even though OT could be considered as a core of the utility business, over the past decade, it has not received the attention and budget that you might expect. On the other hand, many utilities have invested heavily in IT. often encounter utilities with deep-seated fear of exposing OT systems to the IT world. Given how much is at stake, this fear needs to be overcome. For those willing and able to make the leap, IT has the potential to empower grid operations. Take the example of how IT-OT integration changes what happens when an outage occurs. In the control room, OT would traditionally isolate the fault and send the team out to deal with it. In the IT-OT world, the operator can draw on both internal and external data sources in order to better understand the outage. They can provide information to customer-facing systems and activate resources through field force enablement solutions. Addressing these human and cultural differences is essential. Integration of the overall organization will be a key factor in successfully integrating data and technologies.
Yeah, I think the cultural and the siloed way that IT and OT operate is always a bit of a challenge. One last question for you, if I may, before we end off this podcast, and that is, what is it that puts OMNETRIC in such a good position to address the challenges around IT-OT integration?
Yeah, I would say it lies in three areas. First, we are formed back in 2014 precisely to help organizations to connect the worlds of IT and OT. So we live and breathe IT-OT. That's what we do. All our investments, whether it's time, effort, money, are geared towards solving the IT-OT challenges. Secondly, we were formed as a joint venture between Siemens and Accenture, two of the world leaders in their respective fields. We combine the energy, focus, entrepreneurial spirit of a startup with solid backup of Siemens' leading energy technology product portfolio and Accenture recognized smart grid system integration, consulting, and managed service capabilities. And third, and in my view the most significant, we approach IT-OT from the OT angle. The majority of the system integrations come from the IT world. We, on the other hand, understand how to generate and interrogate the data. We have the operations expertise to interpret what the data means and how to feed it back into the different solutions. We can talk the language of both organizations.
I think that's probably a very important differentiator, especially if you are trying to integrate IT into a traditionally OT environment. Edward, I just wanted to say thank you so much for making the time to talk with us today. I really appreciate it. And from me, Claire Volkwyn, to you, our listeners, thanks very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this.